introduction. So this is really all about how do you elevate yourself as a director, and to spend some time doing an introduction to, I suppose, our answer to that, or our gold standard answer to that, which is the Applied Directorship Program. So great to see so many people that are interested in finding out more about this really game-changing program that we launched in 2017. So I'm Tim Holmes, Senior Partner at Sirdar Group. I've been with the organization since 2013, and joined Carl in 2013, originally from the UK, and was in the IT industry, and particularly in asset management space, for 27 years. So this has been quite a change, but along the way had various directorships, and ultimately ended up in a company that had 14 directors, of which I was one, but we never had more than 8 staff. So that was a major part of my journey of trying to understand what all of this directorship stuff was all about. What is the value of a board? How do you use a board? What's the point of a board? So you've got all these very intelligent and very experienced and valuable people in the room. What do you do with this group? How do you get best value from them? So what drives me very much about, I'm trying to change my slides. So what really drives me is this concept of good companies good directors grow companies, but great directors really change lives. So a bit like a lot of people think they're good drivers, but actually there are very, very few great drivers. And similar in the director space. There are quite a few good directors. There are an awful lot of not very good directors. But I really want to challenge all of you on this call to think about, how do I become a great director? So firstly, do I want to become a great director? Am I willing to get on that journey? Am I willing to put in the effort to get to that position? And if I am a great director, what am I going to do on the organizations I'm a director of to really fundamentally change lives? So we're talking about all of the stakeholders that we impact as a business. How do we employ more people? How do we make sure that this business actually is getting to the point where it's really using its full potential? Or are we capping it because we want it to be a lifestyle choice, rather than actually really taking the bull by the horns and taking the organization forward to what it can truly achieve and how it can truly change lives? And in African continent, South Africa in particular, where I live, it's important to get, in fact, it's critical to get way, way, way more people in jobs, get a lot more money circulating around the economy, and moving it from a few hands to the many. So that's our job. That's what we need to do as directors. We need to knuckle down, get on with it, do the best we possibly can, and hopefully have a massive impact along the way. So one question is, what are 3 things that you don't need any training for, but that can have a significant impact on society? So there's an opportunity for you to put something in the chat box. So what 3 things do you not need any training for, but can have a massive impact on society as a whole? Come on, I'm never going to start picking on people to put comments in. Let's see, someone come on, give us a guess. What 3 things? Just guess one. Anything. Can-do attitude. Now I'm thinking more of a role. So it's a very defined role which has responsibilities, but you don't need any training for it. Leadership. Yep, a little bit more specific than that. What would you? Parenting. Good one. Yep, you're on the right track there. Employee. Move up the chain a little bit from employee. Mindfulness, mentorship. Yep, there are aspects of it. Organization, speaking. Cool. We're getting there. So the first one. So we'll dig into the first one, which was parenting. So this is me and my family, and yes, I took the plunge and I became a parent. But I didn't have any qualifications for it. I didn't go to school and study in parenting. I didn't do any courses before I became, maybe some prenatal classes with my wife, but this parenting thing wasn't something I'd been to university to study. I became a parent because I found someone who liked me enough to have a child with me, and we ended up being parents. As a parent, we now need to make a choice. Do we develop our skills and understanding and knowledge about being a parent so we can be the best parent we can be? Or, and many do, decide, I don't want to be a parent. Put your child up for adoption. I don't want to be involved in that journey anymore. Or somewhere in between the two where you don't really try it particularly hard, it just sort of happens and you go with the flow, and that child may or may not end up being a valuable member of society. And that's what I mean by there is a potential for serious impact. Mass murderers have parents. Severe, any crime you can think of, that person had parents at some point. They may have lost them along the way, but they didn't manage to find someone else who was going to take that role. But ultimately, as parents, we have a huge responsibility, but we need to train ourselves. We need to develop ourselves. We need to upskill ourselves to be the best parent we possibly can be. And the other one is politician. There's no qualifications needed to be a politician. So I did a Google search, who is the worst politician ever? And this gentleman from Equatorial Guinea came up because Equatorial Guinea is one of the continent's largest producers of oil and has one of the highest per capita incomes in the world. So in other words, you take the GDP of the country and divide by a number of people, that number is one of the highest in the world. Yet most of the people don't have access to clean drinking water. It has one of the world's highest under 5 mortality rates. About 20% of children die before the age of 5, etc., etc. He's got a private jet. He's got houses all over the world. He's got lots of money in the bank. But the money in that country is in a very small number of hands. So politicians have massive potential to screw things up. Zuma did a really good job in South Africa, and there are plenty of other examples around the world now, not even just Africa. It's not just an African problem anymore. It's happening everywhere. So as a politician, there's no specific qualification. You don't have to do a politics degree to become a politician. You just need to find enough followers to vote you into a position where you have some kind of power. And you may be working out where I'm going here, but the last one is director. And I very specifically chose this picture because I want to think a little bit more positively than the politician thing. And we need to develop directors. We need to develop ourselves so that we can be directors, whether we ever make it or not, because you can have a massive impact on society. But when you sign the form to register a company and put your name down as a director, there is no box that says I have to have an MBA or a PhD or even a business degree before I can sign next to my name as a director. So there's no specific qualification you have to have. But if you are a bad director or you don't run the company as effectively as it could be run from a directorial perspective, then you can have massive impact on tens, hundreds, thousands of people's lives if that company fails, goes into liquidation, and people lose their jobs. So this is what I really want to drive home, is the position of a director is a really important position to study for, study about, practice, build your skills and abilities, knowledge and understanding of this role, because the potential of good and potential for bad in terms of the outcome is huge. So that's why we've developed the Applied Directorship program, the way I want to share the concept and the stuff I'm talking about today with as many people as possible, because we're just not taught this stuff. We sign a piece of paper and miraculously we become a director. There's no divine intervention that puts that knowledge into our heads. We have to go out and seek it, and we have to go and put the effort in to develop ourselves. So what should I know next? So I want to try and answer that question for you as much as I can about, okay, I'm where I am. What do I need to know next if I'm going to take this journey of being a director forward? So let's start with, is this you? You run a business and are looking to implement a value-adding board. Do we have anyone in the audience that this fits for? Just stick yes in the chat box if that's a good fit for you. And I'll go through in a second, I'm going to go through the stages of business growth and when that becomes an important transition. And it could be various sizes of business depending on the industry in, but there's a point where as a leader in an organization, you reach an understanding that you need to move into the space of focused on the business. You need to be thinking strategically more than you're thinking operationally. And the best way to do that is to start thinking in lines of being a director and putting together a board, implementing a board. Taking over a family business and looking to be recognized as a director that has the skills and knowledge to fulfill this role. We're getting a lot of people, so good to see so many people from Kenya. There are a lot of family businesses that are in this phase where they're on the 3rd or 4th generation. And I've lost my mouse here. Is it gone? There we go. 3rd or 4th generation, and now at the point where the younger members are coming through and they're now taking over something quite sizable. So it's really critical that you go through the process of learning about being a director, because that's most likely the role which you're going to end up sitting in. And it's important you can add value as quickly as possible, that you're not going to be there and seen as being there just because you're a family member. We want you to be there because you are adding value. You're looking for your first appointment as a non-exec director. Thanks, McKenna. 2nd generation director in a family business. Fantastic. So we really want to make sure that you in your role know as much about this role as you possibly can, so that you can bring the team and the board and everyone together and take them to the next level. And ideally, the more people in a board that have the training, the better, because then you're all talking the same language, you're all coming from the same perspective. So if you're looking for your first appointment as a non-exec director, it's this new career kind of stage in our lives. I remember when I first was trying to get my first non-exec director position as part of the Sirdar process, and struggled to sort of get the confidence and really feel like I could add value when I was put on my first board. And it took me probably a year to settle in, start to get to learn the ropes, because the Applied Directorship program hadn't been written at that point, and learned after 2 or 3 years how to do this, how to work with the chairman, how to work with the other executive directors and really have an impact. And that business went from 1 business unit to 5 over the place of 4 years. And as I think because of that diversity has managed to survive in the COVID times. Then the Applied Directorship program came on. I did the program, and suddenly I definitely felt more confident going into the conversations about placement. It also unlocked my understanding that I actually really enjoy being a chairman, and I'm really good at being a chairman, and I need to develop that skill and continually try to be a better chairman. And ended up with, now I'm on 4 boards, and I've sat on 7 companies as chairman over the last 5 years. So it definitely makes a difference. Suddenly opening up your eyes to all of the things you need to learn just gives you so much more confidence going into that conversation, because you can come up with examples, you can call on learns, you can call on things you've read and bring that into the conversation. And a lot of the stuff that you will mention or your questions you will ask will be possibly the first time that team have ever had those questions directed at them. They can be very challenging questions. So yes, really, if you're a non-exec director and looking for first appointment, you need some experience. This course is very practical, specifically to try and build that experience so that you're more likely to get that first post. As I said, it's almost like starting a new career. Have the opportunity to become a director, and you want to make the most value-adding contribution. So we've had quite a few people running through the courses who are really nervous. They've got the opportunity to become a director, but are really nervous. Now they've started reading the Companies Act and the roles and responsibilities, thinking, I really don't feel comfortable doing this because I actually don't know enough about the topic to really add value. And the risks are massive if I go into this conversation and I actually get appointed without really knowing what I'm doing. You want to develop your skills further as a non-exec director. We've had quite a few, I don't know the exact number, but I know of at least 2 or 3 specific individuals 3 specific individuals, to be specific, who have been on multiple boards over tens of years. One particular individual has been on boards for 30 years, including listed companies. And he did the Applied Directorship program 2 years ago and came out of it saying, wow, there's so much stuff I'd forgotten, didn't know, need to unlearn, etc. Got immense value from it and has gone forward thinking differently, acting differently on the boards he serves because of the program. So it actually doesn't matter what skill level you're at. There will be things that you don't know. And we've tried to make this course as comprehensive as possible so that we can fill in as many of the gaps as possible. You are an executive director supporting the board process. For larger companies and other large organizations, so it could be listed companies, even it could be large corporates, it could be government companies, even if you are an executive, not even an executive director, but you're supporting the board process, it can be really valuable if you have an extensive understanding of how this process works. Because if you can gather the information, you can present the information, you can take the decisions from the board and disseminate the information better, because you now understand how the board process works, how to make a board effective, then you can drive it from below. There's a very real examples of where this has happened from our clients, where it's ended up being the COO or someone who said, look, I can't take this anymore. Please come in and help and support my board, because I can see that this is not happening, that's not happening. We need to do something differently. But that comes from a space of understanding. So yes, even if you're not serving on a board, it can be massively valuable to learn and understand a lot more about how a board works. So what do you want to know next? Just a few examples. So non-exec first appointment, thank you. Wishes to develop skills, great. That's a good answer to about this question. So what do you need to know next? Any specific comments, any specific ideas so I can make sure that I cover them in the presentation? Come on, there must be someone who's got a, what do I want to know next? So what is why would I want to do this training? Why would I want to go through this pain for 11 months? What do I want to come out of it with? What do I want to say I know? Any examples? Any examples? Add value as an expert director. Thank you, start off the right foot. Awesome. And that's, so if you are starting on this journey, what a pleasure if you have a thorough understanding of what you're in for and you're understanding what it's all about so that you can add value quickly and efficiently and effectively. And that's really why we ended up developing this program. We were placing directors on boards and very quickly realized they didn't have in detail enough understanding of the role. So we ended up teaching them along the way and doing engagements with them along the way to make sure the board ended up being effective, because we were struggling with directors that weren't effective. So great, take those. What are the pitfalls of a new ND? So we'll cover some of that stuff in a second. Roles and responsibilities, liabilities. I'm not going to cover that in this training, but we've got several other webinars I've done in the past, one on strategy, one on culture, one on what next, and talking about the risks of different types of businesses and how do you take them forward from a succession planning perspective. There's a lot of material on our website. If you want to drop me a line or leave your details in the chat box or Q&A, just leave that question in Q&A, then we can send you more information specifically about the roles and responsibilities. But it's a key part of what we talk about in the Applied Directorship program. Obviously has to be. You need to understand the Companies Act. You need to at least understand which pieces of the King 4 guidance notes are applicable to you so that you can comply or explain, etc. And we've got lots of other information from around the world that's very useful in understanding what your roles and responsibilities are. So I'll cover some of the very high level stuff now, but I won't have an opportunity to go in detail. Light funded program will be recognized by IOD. Yes, the program would be recognized as from a CBD perspective by IOD. We don't issue CBD points ourselves, but the programs, reading our books, all of those kind of things are recognized by the IOD. I checked actually last year. Okay, so I'll go through a few foundational things. I wanted to just touch on stages of development of business because I think it helps sort of add an extra layer of context when you're thinking about becoming a director. Go through very briefly what we mean by high performance, and then I'll talk about the introduction to the ADP. So just very quickly, what can you see? Can anybody tell me what they see in this picture? Come on, one, and it's one of you. Tiger, yes, but is it easy to see? No, and in fact, you're probably using some kind of reference point because the stripes look familiar, the leg looks familiar, that it might be a tiger. If we look at it this way, it's really obvious as tiger because we all know they're orange and they've got black stripes. Oh, and yes, that's the legs the right size, and oh yes, the body's about the right size. But what a deer sees is they're red-green colorblind. They don't see orange. Humans can see orange and blue and green. But as an animal, you can't grow green fur very easily, if at all, and you can't grow blue fur. So as an animal, your choice is orange. And it works really well in camouflage for herbivores because they can't see orange. We as humans can, and that's what the analogy I wanted to use from a director perspective. As a director, you need to be able to see orange. If you are colorblind in terms of red-green colorblind, not being able to see the danger, if you just don't have enough experience, you don't have enough practical examples in your head, you haven't done enough training to be able to see the dangers, then you're going to miss on something really important as director. So I just wanted you to think about that. As a human, we can see orange, which in nature often is linked to some kind of danger. As directors, we need to learn to see the danger as early as possible because people in the organization tend to have a view a bit like what the deer is seeing. They tend to have a view where they can't see the danger because they're too close to the problem. So I just want, if that helps, I just want you to think about that. So as human directors, we need to spot the predators on our boards. We need to spot the predators in the organizations. And we need to be the custodians of those businesses and do everything we possibly can in the best interest of the business. So I hope that helps. So foundations. As a director, we also need to be able to see, so taking this concept further, we need to be able to see the difference between a business that is set up like a craft and a business that is set up like an enterprise, because this tends to be a mindset thing. And you need to be able to unpack what is the mindset of the founder or the leadership team. Are they taking this business in a craft direction, based on a craft mindset, or are they thinking like an enterprise, which is much more about the separation of shareholders, directors, and managers? So a craft is very much about the founder. So let's stick with the founder, craftsman, because I've got a picture of a guy. So this individual's knowledge and ability is what's driving the organization forward. And that can take an organization to a certain point. And depending on the capabilities of the individual, a business can actually go pretty far, but the numbers start dropping radically in terms of who's managed to keep that going and stay successful for a number of years. So it's craftsman business is very much focused about your own knowledge and ability, utilizing your own knowledge and ability, and sharing that knowledge with your team so they support you and they're slowly coming up and becoming craftsmen themselves and then master craftsmen ultimately and possibly going off on their own track. So you see this in small businesses, legal firms, accounting firms, doctors, dentists, where they've got 1 or 2 and 3 individuals that have all the knowledge and they drive the business on that basis. But it's basically you're only a job because that business has no value in and of itself. And if the mindset of the founder or the leadership team is coming from that space, it's really difficult to shift them as a director to the space where they're thinking about the organization as being run by the team, which means you really struggle as a director to get involved in the decision-making process, to really have the conversations, because the founder keeps going off and doing their own thing. So it's critical at the early stages of engaging with a firm to work out where that organization is going. Are they building something that's based on the craft? A, it's going to be really difficult for you to operate as a director, but B, actually that asset has little value. It's about people having jobs. And again, there's not much room for doing a job as a director in that context. So we want to work with entrepreneurs who understand that the word entrepreneur comes from the word entreprendre, which is the French definition for to undertake, make a promise. So an enterprise is the thing that holds that promise, delivers that promise, consistently goes out there and does what the market's expecting of them based on that promise. The entrepreneur can stay in that organization, or they can move on to the next challenge and build the next business. And you talk about serial entrepreneurs who've sold a business at a particular point and they've moved on and started the next one. But if they've built something as an enterprise, then it's more likely to be able to continue and move forward under its own steam, because it is an asset of value and it's built foundationally based on a team. So the test, an enterprise must be able to operate without the immediate involvement of the founder on a day-to-day basis. So if you are hearing the language of, this business can't run without me, I can't take leave, as soon as I go away, it all falls apart, then be wary if you're going into that with the idea of becoming a director, because that person needs to change their mindset quite significantly before you're going to be able to actually add significant value on that board. And the second principle must have its own significant value and potential and can continue to grow and develop even despite the non-involvement, death or retirement of the founder. So we want to be building a team of directors that run a business headed up by a professional MD who may or may not be the founder, but we want them to be the best person for that job. And then we have shareholders above that, one or many, who are providing investment capital and expecting some kind of return. But it has to be a team in the middle that drives this thing if you want to build the resilience, the sustainability and ability to continue with the non-involvement, death or retirement of a founder. So in these times, we must be realizing, please, as societies must be realizing, and particularly as entrepreneurs, that we're not immortal. Something can happen that was unexpected, and we need to build in succession planning. And a critical piece of succession planning for a medium to large organization is to make sure you've got a really strong board. For a smaller business, it's probably just life assurance or training someone up to be your craftsman and become a master craftsman. So enterprise, nothing to do with you. It's all about the team. The game rules are different. You're playing a team sport. You're not playing badminton or tennis. You're playing rugby or football or whatever else. It's a very different dynamic. And if you take out one team member, it doesn't mean that the whole team falls apart. So it's separate and distinct from you as a founder, and it requires shareholders, directors, and managers. So we're moving into the space where, as a director, you're a fundamental piece of the answer, whereas in the craft, you may not be. So that's another thing you need to look out for and be aware of, that if that structure is clear, you need to understand how it works, because in a board meeting, you need to be able to push conversation back to shareholders where relevant and push operational discussions down to managers where relevant. So it's critical that from day one, you walk in there with a really good understanding of what an enterprise is all about. And we cover that extensively on the training program. So what is the role of the director? Some of them have come up in other questions earlier. Strategy, leadership, governance. Those are the key three areas you need to be thinking about as a director. So if we're not talking about strategy in a board meeting, what are we talking about? If we are not acting as leaders in the organization, why are we there? And if we're not applying good governance principles, then we're not doing our job legally or morally. So if those three things are covered, you can really start to shift the needle. And what is governance about? Governance is the way you implement things into a business so that it's sustainable and it becomes part of a system. So it's the policies, it's the procedures. It's we've decided as a board, this is how things should be done. And then you implement it within the organization as a policy or procedure so that everyone in the organization knows this is the way we do things around here. You're building that system that is no longer reliant on an individual. Your standard operating procedures, etc., etc., etc. So again, as I said, you take one key individual out, there's the system. You just need to put the new person in with the right skills to take over. And governance comes from Kubernetes, which means to steer or pilot a ship. So one of the earlier concepts, or earliest concepts of shareholders, directors, and managers is if you think about the idea of a ship leaving harbor, the shareholders have put the money in, they hand over to the captain and the other officers to take charge of this vessel. Then the captain and the officers takes it out to sea and uses the crew to make it move, pull up sails or operate the engines or whatever it might be. But from the point it leaves the harbor, shareholders have no involvement. Their right is to return on investment. So if the guy doesn't come back with anything in his hold after the trading trip, or money in his pockets from a trading trip, or loses the ship, then the captain's likely to get fired or worse. We don't understand that well enough in a business context. So it's critical as directors that we really truly understand that and we live that. Sorry guys, this is a shareholder discussion. We need to take that in a separate meeting. Look, that's way too operational. Minute the action item, if important from a board perspective, to give us feedback, but you need to have that conversation in your ExCo meeting. And we have to do that all the time to make sure that we're driving proper governance processes, proper strategic thinking in the board meeting. And just thinking about that visualization. Why is the shareholder getting involved? They're not on the ship. They put the money in, we need to give them a return on investment, but they're not on the ship. So this is what it looks like in our world. This is the way we try and split it out and explain it. It's a diagram we've used in lots of talks. There is a relationship between the shareholder and the company, the board and the company, and management of the company, but they are different and distinct. So a shareholder is a selfish relationship. I've put something in, time, money. I want a return on my investment. Board is a selfless relationship. So we need to make sure that remove all conflicts. We are only in the room to do what's in best interest of the company, not best interest of ourselves. And so many of the organizations of South Africa are failing miserably because the focus of directors and senior management is to enrich themselves. That's not how it works as a director. And management has the complex relationship of a negotiated contract which has parts selfish and parts selfless, which is why it's the double-edged sword. And then very clear, defined line that you must not cross as a shareholder and start influencing the board. You can appoint the directors, but you shouldn't be influencing the decisions of the board. Management, a little bit more fluid, but it should be the conversation should be passing through the CEO, MD, as that apex of the pyramid, the reporting pyramid. So again, part of the program goes this in a lot more detail. In fact, most of the first session covers this concept in detail and goes through worked examples. So from an individual leadership perspective, I was introduced to this a few weeks ago, and I thought it was just such great timing, because as individuals, if we want to become a director and really truly add value, we need to have moved into this convergent phase and possibly even be moving into the legacy phase. And as you can see from the lines underneath, between 25 and 35, most people have finished the learning phase. They've been to university, they've got their first job, they may or not have had family or children by then, they've learned about a lot of stuff. Now you need to move into the next phase where you bring all that stuff together and you start to work out and tease out, okay, well, that I need to deal with, it's not important for the future, this I need to develop further, what is my particular focus for the next while, what is my clear trajectory in terms of my career, etc., etc. And we work through that for the next 10 to 15 years until we're somewhere around 55, 60, when we need to stop and think, okay, I've done all this stuff, I've developed all these skills, I've learned all these things. Now, how do I bring it all together and focus on my core legacy? What is it I'm going to leave behind that's going to change the game? What do I want to be remembered for? I can't be remembered for this many things. What were the one or two things I want to be clearly remembered for because I've done a fantastic job? And that might be, in your case, being a director and having an impact, or leaving a legacy of a business because it's been structured correctly and it's sustainable for multi-generations, etc. So think about where you might be on that course. And I would suggest that in order to be an effective director, you should be somewhere around this sort of convergence phase. You're starting to bring together an understanding of self. You're starting to bring together an understanding of what you're good at and you're bad at. And you can then apply that and maybe broaden your knowledge and fill in some gaps so that you can become a truly effective director. So key traits, I was just thinking about meetings I've been in recently and what we've been discussing. So you have to be a leader, and particularly as the chairman, you have to lead from behind. You have to encourage, you have to lead by suggestion and have you thought about this, by questioning, by asking those tough questions to get the executive team to start to think differently and start to realize the possible potentials going forward. You have to be a coach sometimes. You have to be a mentor sometimes, and there's a difference between the two. You have to be a counselor. You have to be a facilitator. You have to mediate in terms of sitting in between parties that are raging, and whether it be shareholders, whether it be other directors, whoever it might be. There's definitely times as a non-exec director where you have to mediate, otherwise it has a massive impact on the organization. You have to have a high EQ. So that's part of that consolidation phase of making sure you've dealt with all of your ego issues, your insecurities, whatever it might be, so that you can stay calm and in control of your emotions in the room. If there's a non-exec director you can't stay calm and in control, then there's little chance that the whole board is going to be able to do that regularly and consistently, and is therefore not going to be effective. There's just going to be too much emotion and stuff flying around. It needs to be a calm, professional space. So that's one of the massive powers and influences of non-execs. You've got less emotional triggers in that moment because you haven't been part of the journey of getting the organization to where it is now. So you have the capacity to be calmer and more in control. So you can just slow things down. Well, come on, let's stick to the facts. What has this happened? What happened there? What can we learn from that? How do we take this forward? What decision do we need to make, etc., etc. And it's critical that you have a broad knowledge of business. So if you don't understand how marketing works because you've never been exposed to it, go and learn something about it. If you're really struggling with finance, you have to have at least a basic financial competence, so you can read an income statement and a balance sheet, etc., etc. So as part of the training, we're trying to cover off as many of these bases as well, to open your eyes to things which you may or may not know, and try to encourage you to fill those gaps so that you end up with a really broad knowledge of business. Because at director level, you need to understand the whole business, not just one or two pieces of it. So quickly, well, I need to make sure we've got time for the rest. So just to give an indication, the key thing about this diagram is the piece at the bottom, the business and the owner. So in a startup phase, as the business grows, the owner is intrinsically involved, but only once this starts to get to divisional level and starts to mature and starts to grow, and then starts to be a separation between the founder and or owner in inverted commas, separation from the business and the owner, can you start to really get traction in the boardroom. So it's important to understand and be able to see when that starts to happen. So typically in growth phases, we've gone through the growth through creativity, we've gone through the growth through direction. You end up with the crisis of autonomy, which is where I'm losing control, I can't do it all myself. Then you start growing through delegation, but then there's another crisis because, yes, I've delegated, but I still don't feel like I've got control. And now you need to work through coordination. So you need to build trust relationships, you need to coordinate efforts. You can't, and understand, I can't control everything. I need to give people responsibility. That's where the board really starts to kick in. When people say, look, how big or small a business is, it's really the phase of the business which is absolutely critical. So if you're looking for positions, then look out for these kind of signals, because it'll give you a much better understanding of what you need to do next. So a high performance director, obsessed with creating meaningful economic impact and the social compact as well, through their role on the board and their role the company plays in the economy. So such a director is not afraid to have the tough conversations as well as do the mundane aspects. This piece is critical. You need to be able to stand up with confidence and say, this is not the right thing to do, or this is the right thing to do, and talk through and overcome the resistance. But it's a tough conversation. It's rarely an easy conversation. And there's a whole bunch of mundane stuff you need to do as well. You have to read the papers, you need to prepare, you need to do some research, you need to fill in the gaps in your understanding. And it's an absolutely critical part of being a director. So what companies say when we are speaking to them and they're looking for directors, give us directors who've practiced their skill and experience in the boardroom. The fundamental reason why we built the Applied Directorship program to be 11 modules, including 8 board meetings, was so that you could say you've practiced your skill and experience in a boardroom. And then hopefully get into the real world and practice it even more so that you can start to build some implementation skills. But often the stuff you've learned from a board before is not all that valuable. And there's a phase where you actually need to unlearn a lot of the habits you got into on other boards. So I think it's better to actually learn the right way first time round, so that you're starting with a high performance mindset and you don't have to unlearn bad habits and start again. And just because someone's been a chief executive does not mean they'll know how to relate to me as a director. And this is down to, as a chief executive, the role is different from being a director, particularly a non-exec director. As a non-exec director, you're not in control of anything. You need to influence, you need to support, you need to talk things, mentor, coaching, all that kind of stuff. You can't decide, you can't dominate the conversation. It's a team sport. We need to all be involved in the conversation. And often if someone's been a very successful chief executive, they're used to having their way, they're used to knowing the answer, then it's really sometimes quite difficult to step back and say, look, hold on, I need to actually give other people a chance. And we want to know that, as talking to Sirdar, can confirm they know what they're doing. So if we've been with you for 11 months of this journey, then Roger and the other members of our team have a pretty good idea of whether you're going to be an effective director or not. And again, when we're making appointments, it obviously makes it much easier to say with confidence to the client, we know that this person can do the job. And generally, this whole process is not about certification. It's about understanding and value. So we're not going to give you a degree or a diploma. We're not going to take exams. This is self-reflection exercise. This is discipline. This is habit. This is doing things over and over and over again until you get it. I want you to live the program as if you're going to live as a director in the real world. Not say, I've got the certificate now, I don't need to learn anymore. This is just the beginning of the journey. This is that flat stage before you go exponential. There's so much more that you need to do after the program, and you need to be disciplined and understand the value of doing it. So the program, Sirdar, just context, is global leader in the education, appointment and guidance of high performance boards. So we've been doing this for nearly 12 years now, and have focused exclusively on training directors, appointing directors, and then supporting boards and building boards so they can be really effective and take the organization to the next level. And we work very closely with other organizations such as Edge Growth and 10xe and those kind of guys who've done a lot of that sort of accelerated piece, and then we can take the organization and take it to the next level. So mountaineers do not learn to climb by solely completing a mountaineering degree, and directors are no different. This is practical time in the boardroom. We want to give you that opportunity to spend practical time in the boardroom because it's absolutely critical to your success as a high performance director. So overview of the program. Question that comes up often is, what is the difference between an MBA and Sirdar Applied Directorship program? An MBA is designed for management. The Sirdar Applied Directorship program is designed for directors. So it can be massively valuable if you have done an MBA. I know many of our directors have done MBAs, and that general business knowledge is a critical part of the skill, the toolbox you need to be bringing in. But this is about being a better director, being the best director you can possibly be. And it's not a 1 week intense course. We have to make it extended because we have to get you to the point where you understand how to fit this in with your day-to-day life. Having a monthly meeting, a dedicated 4 hours in your diary, you need to be in the room or on the call for your board meeting with your other members of your cohort, as if you were on the board of a company that was meeting once a month. If we do it intensively, it's too clinical, it's too clean, life doesn't get in the way enough. We want you to experience what it's like trying to do this director thing with life getting in the way. How do you adapt? How do you change your plans? How do you fit in the time to read the board papers, etc., etc.? Because that's what it's like in the real world. Because again, we want to make sure that the program is as close to real world as possibly can be. And it's theory and simulation. So there's a whole bunch of videos, readings, etc. on the platform, and then you do the simulation in the room on the Zoom call each month. So it's a combination of the two. It's the learning, applying, learning, applying. So it's that rinse and repeat continuous process that builds habits. And it's about understanding the director, the team, and the methodology, and all of those pieces coming together. So it's not just about me as an individual. I've now practiced it in a team because I've been in a simulated board in the program and competing against other boards. So we put the cohort into 2 or 3 boards of 4 or 5 individuals, and you run a company on a simulator platform. So that you are as practically as possible running a company with financial results coming back and making decisions and seeing what the impact is. So that you get to operate as a team of directors. You get to see what that looks like, feel what that feels like, and learn the lessons you need to learn. You get a chance to be the chairman of that team at least once. So you can, again, experience what that's all about and apply a defined methodology. Apply something that you can then use in the real world. Just thinking, I'll get back to your question at the end about orange cherry. Okay, so methodology is a key part of everything because it's the process of the board, it's the way you put together your minutes, the way you put together your board papers, the way you plan your decision papers, etc. is all critical pieces that when put together, when you've got properly trained directors who understand how to work as a team and they've got a support team below them and they're using a consistent methodology, wow, it really makes a difference. And you start to build this concept of a strong boardroom in the middle, strong directors on the end of the lever. The methodology gives you that good, strong foundational lever to pull on, and now suddenly you can affect company performance dramatically and radically. 10 times profits. Seen it, done it multiple times, it happens. It's real. Taking decisions of tens of millions of investment that 6 months earlier, the founder was really struggling to get their head around. And a year later, they were wondering why on earth they had a problem. It's just been the best thing that's happened and the business is flying because of it, etc. Because you've got that full spectrum covered, now you can start to really move company performance. And it's just massively satisfying if you get it right. It's definitely part of a legacy worth building. So course components, we talked about the pieces of the puzzle being 8 sessions in the board meeting. So this is what it's built on. This is what we call our governance compass. So the course is built around this compass. So you have 8 board meetings taking you through each of these segments. So there's a segment on strategy and direction, organizational culture, effective leadership, etc. And I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail in a minute. And as a board, understanding that these forces of purpose, sustainability, performance, and conformance are always there and they're pulling against each other. But as a board, we need to constantly keep them in mind to make sure that one is not dominating the other. So if you drive performance in an organization, what typically happens is conformance starts to suffer. We start breaking a few rules, taking a few shortcuts, and eventually we get caught out. So as a board, we need to be watching out for this kind of stuff all the time to make sure it's not being pulled out too far. Like a bubble, like a balloon, it's going to burst if you pull it in one direction too much. We also include traversing the avalanche. So we were talking about be able to see the dangers coming. So our analogy, the Sirdar is the lead Sherpa on a mountain expedition. So that's why we chose the title of Traversing the Avalanche, because the Sirdar's job is to pull you out of the way if they can sense that the avalanche is coming. That's your job particularly as a non-executive director, but it applies to any director. We need to make sure that we're pulling the organization out of the way if we see the avalanche is coming. So that book is a major part of the course. You read that book during the course, and then there's another book which is quite useful to buy for your team members. It gives a good overview of Law of Three Hats, etc. And the other component is the Contribution Compass profiling tool, which we use to help you define how to build the team, how to build your board. So we've learned along the way that if you don't include some element that determines the strengths and weaknesses and preferences of the people in the room, and you don't analyze that and assess that for the team that's sitting around the boardroom table, what happens is the dominant behaviors drive the outcome for the organization, so that the organization ends up going in a particular direction, but it's because of the profiles of the individuals sitting around the table. So a board needs to be as balanced as possible. And we take you through real examples. We set up the boards in the program using these kind of philosophies and methodologies so that you can experience it firsthand as you're going through the exercises and running the board in the program. So 11 modules. The first one I said is the introduction, where we talk about the three hats of director, shareholder, manager, and give you sort of the foundational stuff that I've touched on at a very high level. Second session is where we start to talk about the contribution compass, the team, how do you build a board, and then build your boards and give your boards and companies a name, and then you decide on what your product is, and then that's all put into the simulator so that in module 3, when you start talking about strategy and direction, you're talking about the strategy and direction of a company that has a name, it has a board, it has a product, and now you need to take that forward. So we try and, as I said, gamify it, try and make it as real as possible, give you some levers you can pull, and you can see what the outcome is, and then you get measured against those outcomes every month. We put it up on a leaderboard. Again, just generates a bit of excitement and a bit of competition, and gets the juices flowing, makes it a bit less academic, so it's a bit more real. Then in 4, we talk about organizational culture. So we see that compass, things flow around the compass. So you get the strategy right. The next step is to get the culture right in alignment with the strategy. So we take you through examples. There's videos on the topic, etc., etc., and the importance of a culture, a good culture in an organization, how you measure it, how you communicate it, etc. Once you've got the strategy and the culture right, then it's much easier to determine whether you've got the right people in the organization, whether you've got the right leadership. So module 5 is when we go in a lot more detail around chief executive performance enhancement, how you make sure you've got the right leadership in the team, etc., so that we can start to build the foundations of your company. And then you go into understanding the stakeholder engagement. So you've defined the internal structure. Now you can start to broaden the net and start to think about, who do we impact from a stakeholder perspective? Clients, suppliers, staff, environment, community, etc. And again, lots of related reading and videos that go with that topic. 7 is shareholder returns, and understanding how dividend policies are put together, why they're put together in a particular way, what is the impact on shareholders, and attracting the right shareholders if you're a larger corporate or you're looking to sell the business. If you set things up in the returns and the dividend policies and all of those kind of things up in a particular way, you're more likely to attract particular types of investment and particular types of shareholders. So lots of detail around that, which can be really useful and a massive eye-opener if you've never really been exposed to it before. Then you go into risk and compliance, which is what typically people think of as being governance, but it's a piece of the puzzle, not the whole puzzle. Budget setting, and then last is we do a real-life board evaluation, and then the 11th module is when we talk about sharing experiences. What did you learn? How did your company do so much better than everyone else? It's a great closeout, sort of celebration of the journey that everybody's been on. So 11 months in total, maximum cohort of 20, broken into 3 or 4 boards of directors. You have 8 simulated board meetings, 4 hours per month in the session. So treat it like a board calendar. These are when we're having our board meetings. They're non-negotiable. I'm going to move heaven and earth to make sure I'm there. 3 to 4 hours per week of preparation online learning. If you confine to it 3 or 4 hours, you will be fine. So a Sunday afternoon, a couple of hours reading whilst you're driving, listening to audios whilst you're driving, that kind of thing, you can get through the material relatively easy, but you need to be quite consistent. And then a network of like-minded individuals. So you're working with 20 people who are also aspiring or existing directors who are in a similar position in life. They want to do this better, share a story, share experiences, build a network. And because it's online and it's across Africa, it's much broader reach than when we were limited to particular cities. And you get a certificate of attendance and a certificate of competence. So what's the point of doing this thing? To reinforce and augment the knowledge and understanding of directors' duties, specifically the statutory and all the rest of the stuff. So you'll have a really clear understanding of what they are. Develop an understanding of an effective high-performance board and the methodology. So why is that important? What does it look like? What does it feel like? You'll have tested that. You'll have repeated it. So you'll have a really clear idea of what that's like. Be able to say you've experienced a high-performance board engagement, because you have. You've been through the simulated process. You've been in meetings for 2 hours once a month with a team of people. So you know what it's like. And ensure you have a working knowledge so that how to run a board meeting, what does governance documents look like, how do you draw up agenda, et cetera, is all part of the process, and templates around those. So demonstrate practical experience, identify areas of personal directorship, strengths and opportunities. Do I want to be a chairman? What is the particular aspect I bring to the table when in the boardroom? Am I the quiet think who comes up with the deep nuggets, or am I the person who just makes sure everybody gets a voice? What is your role in a board? And yeah, the certificate is becoming more and more recognized internationally, particularly now that we're more and more involved with the likes of YPO and EO and the Institute of Directors all over the world. There's started to become much more recognition. This is something that adds value. Unfortunately, we can't guarantee a placement, but we can certainly help and support you to find a placement through the appoint process. So I just needed to state that. If you want to apply and join the Directors Network, then that's very much an opportunity. So no time for this, no time for the boardroom. It's as real as possible. The time commitments are as similar as possible to a monthly board. And actually these days, most boards have some kind of engagement once a month. So it's critical that you understand that. So Buffett says best investments in yourself. So this is the investment right now. I know depending on where you came from, depending on who the person was that brought you onto the call, there may be different local deals. So this is the most you will pay, but I know that there are definitely opportunities to get some kind of special deal with the specific people you're talking to. There are various payment plans, so monthly payment plans, quarterly payment plans, whatever you need to do. The next cohort starts on the 9th, which is coming up soon. So just a sort of encouragement, the offer I've put together was, and because I think it's so important that you bring the team with you when you're on this journey, is if you are an executive or you're already a part of an organization and on the board, if you can get an understanding to that executive team about how they operate together, it's going to make your job as a board much more effective and much easier, because you're going to understand how they play to each other's strengths. So if you can sign up before the 31st, which is very soon, I'm going to offer a contribution compass profile for each of the team members of your exco and do a team report feedback. So to register, if you go to bit.ly ADP online, and that'll take you to a page that looks very similar to this. And it's an application form, asks a few questions, similar to what many of you have replied in the chat box about why you want to do it, so that we just got an idea and we can make sure that we give you the experience that you're looking for. And that's basically, in rapid fire form, ADP program. So what questions do we have? We had a question was about experience for introducing and identifying risk. innately as well. So, you react to something. Yes, it could be intuition, it could be genetic, it could be whatever is driving that reaction in your body when you sense the danger. But obviously experience helps, because it helps fine tune that early warning system. So I don't know if that answers your question. And the more inexperienced you are, the less likely you are to know what to do with that information. If that scary feeling comes, what do you do with it? How do you process it? Oops. Oh. Sorry, that was me. I think I blocked you, Sirdar. I mean, Sali, sorry. So yes, just give us an indication if you want me to call you, if you've got something else just for a free consult, so you just want to find out a little bit more about where you might be, where your organization might be, what would be the best next step, if you're not sure about the craft versus enterprise, any of those kind of things, happy to help. Otherwise, talk to the affiliate that got you on the call, or one of our sales team that got you on the call. Any other questions? Anything? Appointing directors represent a shareholder block. Okay, Michael, I'm going to, if I can, Michael. Can't see you on the list. So just as a general question, directors should be nominated by shareholders, and it'll depend on the shareholders agreement and also potentially the MOI about how that works, and make sure the two talk to each other, because that's also a common mistake. So when you're thinking about placing directors or appointing directors, shareholders need to have a clear understanding of what they want. So we often do quite a lot of consulting around a diagnostic to determine what types of directors the organization needs. So shareholders need to be clear on what type of director they need, and then put forward multiple directors if possible, and for the board to decide, this person's a good cultural fit, they're going to work well with the team, we can see that the value they're going to add, and they adopt that person into that team with confidence. So like any other employment process, it becomes tricky if you force a director onto a board, because it breaks the dynamic of the team, and that's always dangerous. So just like you wouldn't force someone into an executive team or an effective management team, then don't do the same with a board. So it's really difficult as a shareholder, often, that they just don't, particularly VCs, they will put someone from their organization onto the board, and that's the way they do it. That's the investment, that's the criteria, we're going to put someone on the board. But they may not necessarily be the best fit for the age and stage of that organization, or for the skills that the organization actually needs. Thank you for those of you who have to leave. Thank you for your time. Sorry we ran over slightly. Any other questions? I'll hang around for a few minutes if you want to ask anything else. I see there's another one. No, nothing else in Q&A. Anything else on chat? What are your payment terms? So as I said, you either pay upfront and you get potentially get what do you call it, cash payment discount. You pay in quarterly blocks, but there will be some interest component, or you can pay monthly on a debit order. And again, there'll be some kind of interest component. So it's really up to you what you want to do in between those kind of parameters. So we're happy to talk to individuals and work out something that makes sense. What else do we have? Official quote and brief. So yes, we've got a brochure. We can give you more detail than that if you need it. So again, reach out to me or reach out to the person that got you on the call, and we can give you some more detail in a document that you can then present to your HR department for funding, or however your process works. There's I actually did a presentation on Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was my What Next webinar I did a couple of months ago. So that's online, and happy to share the links to the last 3 or 4 webinars if it's of any value. So as I said, one was on strategy, one was on culture, one was on, the idea was it was effective leadership and determining where you take the organization next, and part of that was the sort of warning of the danger coming of the fourth industrial revolution and how it's going to significantly change things. And then the fourth one was very much more focused on succession planning specifically, and a few examples of the difference it can make if you build a business as a craft in terms of value versus you building a business as an enterprise. No other questions? So then we'll close the session. Thank you very much indeed. And all the best. So we'll, as I said, you will hopefully receive a follow-up from the person who got you on the call. Otherwise, I'll send out to anyone who's not covered by somebody specifically, if you came through our marketing platform, etc. And we'll send you a link to the recording. I'll send you the link to the videos, and there's a couple of other bits and pieces we might include as well. Links to a new ebook which Carl Bates launched last week, which is very informative. But I look forward to seeing you on the Applied Directorship program. I know you won't regret it. I know you'll gain enormously. The cost will pale into insignificance once you understand the value of the process you've been through. And again, if you're not sure, have any other questions, then please reach out and ask. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers. Bye for now.